Good morning, Sam. We're only waiting 5 more minutes to see if anybody else is going to join us this morning. Thank you for being here.
So are you going to give this program to me to run from my computer? In other words, are you going to have me run it here and then use my computer, or are you going to run it?
Parker mentioned that he's going to run.
Screen sharing?
So yeah, are you going to share my screen, or am I just going to talk to your screen?
You'll just talk to my screen.
Okay, cool.
Parker, you want to start? There you go. So we will start. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on this educational presentation to help prepare the residents of Malibu to comply with the new requirements for dark sky. The deadline for this ordinance is October 15th, so we hope that you enjoy this presentation by our engineer, James Peña. And here we go. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the program. The process of developing this ordinance for the city of Malibu began almost a decade ago, and it's gotten a lot of good reviews, and a lot of work has been put into it. I'm very proud of the small part I've played in helping make this. I'm going to take some time this morning to explain to homeowners and others, developers, contractors, how to comply with the residential requirements of the dark sky ordinance. Slide, please. So this is in the purpose, as it's stated in the ordinance, to preserve Malibu's rural character and quality of life, protect wildlife and habitats from light pollution, preserve enjoyment of the nighttime sky, promote the city's goal of conserving energy and natural resources. Couldn't ask for better principles than that. And this is probably one of the most advanced ordinances that I know of anywhere on the planet. Its big advantage is we've done our best working with the city over this past decade to get this in such a way that it makes sense. It's doable, it's reasonable, it's rational, and that's what's built into this program. Slide, please. First thing I want to do is say, what is light pollution? Light pollution is anthropogenic light at night. That's the phrase we now use, or ALAN. But anthropogenic means man-made. Some people call it artificial light. It's not artificial, it's real light. And that's why this is really the best way to tell it. It's the excessive or poor use of man-made outdoor light. It wastes energy, disrupts the natural patterns of wildlife, contributes to the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, disrupts the circadian system of all living beings, and obscures the stars in the night sky. And this is real important. Light pollution affects the night sky up to 150 miles from the source. So there are the impacts of bad things at night are going to affect a much larger area than you might think. Slide, please. These are two images of the same exact home and the same exact street, the same exact point of view. Before normal light polluted sky where you can see a few stars. And then when the great Los Angeles blackout occurred and all the street lights and pretty much all the lights went out, all of a sudden disappeared. And I remember reading about how people were calling in to the police saying there's smoke in the air, when in fact what they were seeing for the first time was the Milky Way. Slide, please. This is really part of the problem. Major cities, Los Angeles is a major city, many people, and it has a lot of light pollution. This photograph taken from the Griffin Observatory really shows how much light pollution there really is, given that this immense amount can travel 150 miles from its source. The Malibu lighting ordinance isn't going to prevent that from affecting Malibu. So as you look to the east from Malibu, there'll always be a glow from the city of Los Angeles. But where things will really improve will be looking to the west and to the southwest. This is where the light pollution will not be coming from, and you're certainly not going to be creating any of it. So it's going to help a lot, but we can't fix this. Slide, please. By the way, there's somebody waiting to be admitted. Did you pick that up?
Yeah.
Okay, good. We also do some kind of not so great things for good reasons. Here's a really good example. The city of New York is pretty light polluted, but the twin power towers of light, nobody really saw those as causing light pollution, but they cause a different type of light pollution. The light pollution they cause, because these beams go straight out into space, but what they caused was they attracted migratory birds that would fly into these beams and fly around in circles until because they became disoriented, and they would ultimately fall exhausted to their death. 1.2 million migratory birds were killed before this was identified, the cause of all this bird death. So the lights are now only turned on for memorial services and periods of no migration. So even some of our best intended lighting schemes aren't always a great result. Slide, please. Here's an example from Northern California, the Sacramento River in Redding. The spectacular bridge designed by a world-famous architect is an important part of their park and the city's renaissance and the things that are going on there. It's really a wonderful bridge designed by Calatrava. But the problem is that then somebody said, well, it's a bridge. We got to light it up at night. And they did. They put in all these color changing LED lights. And what happened is they discovered fairly quickly is the Sacramento River salmon run downstream depopulated by 90% or more. And they had finally discovered and attributed it to the lighting at this bridge. It caused the salmon to become disoriented and either dying from starvation or from predation. So we're kind of learning these things as we go along, but thank goodness to the Sierra Club and other communities that are rising up from us and pointing these things out so we can study them and figure out what to do and not to do. And this is one thing not to do. Slide, please. This is a new slide I added this time, folks, by the way, for those of you who've seen this program before. It's a photograph from New York, the Long Island coast. And you can see what happens when we build up along coastlines, which we love to do just about everywhere, including Malibu. But it's very common for these to become brightly lighted, bright buildings, bright attractions of all kinds. And the ordinance will prevent this. And I think that's going to be a very, very good, important thing in preserving not only the view of the coastline, but also preserving the nature of the coastline. So this is one of the greatest outcomes, I think, of the ordinance. It'll prevent all this. We're already doing things with commercial facilities along PCH to get them to cut back and reduce their lighting impacts. So this is a big plus coming from the ordinance. And by the way, it will save energy. It will do a lot of other good things, and it'll make the community a little bit quieter, a little bit nicer at night. Slide, please. all kinds of environmental light pollution exists everywhere. And so one of the objectives and one of the goals is to eliminate as much of it as possible. You know, people will take a building and they'll just put lights on it. And here's a really good example. Well, and there's an unshielded street light up there and a lot of other stuff that you know isn't good. The ordinance is going to fix this. It's going to minimize this. You're not going to be allowed to have lights near the beach. It's going to be extremely restricted in many areas, the beach and environmentally sensitive habitat areas, by measured trespass, which is the amount of light that you allow onto that adjacent property. You're not going to be allowed much more than starlight traveling off your property onto another, if at all. So this will make a big difference. Slide, please. This is one everybody hates. It's called light trespass. This happens to show where a street light trespass is literally lighting up the inside of somebody's bedroom window on the second story, or third story maybe even. This has got to go away. There's all kinds of light trespass. It comes from street lights. It comes from your neighbor's lights. And in residential neighborhoods, people aren't going to be able to have those bright glaring lights that a lot of people like to use, and they slap them on the side of the house. They're called sconces or lanterns. You're not going to be able to have those that will create this kind of light trespass. It's going to be a very good thing, and people are really going to appreciate it. Slide, please. Here's an example where street lighting is causing a lot of glare and light trespass. I know this doesn't exist in Malibu, and it probably never will, but it's something we have to be wary of. You know, it's very tempting to put in those great looking lantern street lights that create, you know, very bright streets. But the negative impacts of them are pretty bad. We don't have to do that. We can still have attractive street lights. We just have got to shield them so that the light is going downward and the light is warm toned, not harsh bluish colored light. Slide, please. Oh, by the way, the city does have plans to convert all of the city's lighting to match in its own way. And I've been working with city agencies so that the new lighting the city puts in and replaces some of the old lighting will always meet the same requirements that the ordinances required of private property. Okay, this is about outdoor lighting basics. Downward light and light at useful angles is what we're trying to achieve. So you see in this picture, coming from an ordinary street light, there's light going down. It lights the street and the sidewalks. That's good. We don't want to have too much. That can be bad, but it does a good thing. But many times lighting has other problems. For example, you can get glare if the light is coming out at a high angle so that you're walking down, you're in your front yard, and you're still getting the glare in your eyeball. We want to get rid of that. And light at even higher levels, as we saw in the previous pictures, you have light trespass into bedroom windows. We really want to get rid of that. And then for lights that create upward light, you know, it's just wasted. It's going up into the sky, and it's creating that light pollution that prevents you from seeing the stars. We want to eliminate that. Now, there's two other things I want to point out to you. Some light is going to go down, hit the street, and bounce up. Not much we can do about that, except to not have too much light on the street to begin with. That will minimize that. The other thing is light will be reflected back down due to clouds, and especially the marine layer. California's entire coast suffers the marine layer from time to time, and it captures and reflects the light downward. I have measured light levels extremely high caused by this in the middle of, for example, San Diego Bay. So it's a real problem. And so we have to minimize the amount of light that's bouncing up off the streets and sidewalks so that we have a minimum impacts, especially due to marine layer and low clouds. So these are all the ideas that have got to be contemplated as we go ahead and design new lighting to meet the requirements. Slide, please. The basics of dark sky lighting. This was co-developed fairly recently by the International Dark Sky Association, working with the Illuminating Engineering Society. These 5 principles are being shared worldwide now, and they all work together. You may hear different versions, but all say the same thing. Number 1, all lighting should have a clear purpose. Many times people put up lights just to decorate. That's sort of not always a good, clear purpose. I'm a professional lighting designer. I've designed lighting for aesthetic purposes for years and years. But all I'm saying here, though, is that you can do that and still follow the rest of the principles. Like number 2, should be directed only where needed. If you're going to light a sidewalk or stairs, light the sidewalk, light the stairs. Don't light the ceiling, or don't light the soffit, or don't light the sky. Number 3, light should be no brighter than necessary. That's a really important one. People think brighter is better. It isn't. There are places where it makes a difference, yes. And let's say, for example, if you're lighting a car dealership. Now, we're not going to have any of those, but they exist. And yes, they're lighted brighter because they're for business, they want to attract attention. We're really not going to have to deal with that in Malibu, thank goodness. But nonetheless, people have a tendency to want to make their something brighter to attract attention. We got to tone that down. Number 4, light should only be on when it's useful. We have a number of codes and ordinances. Not only is the Malibu lighting ordinance restricting lighting when it can be on, but we have other state codes that restrict it as well. So turning lights off when we don't need them is going to be a very important part of how we reduce light pollution. And 5, use warmer colored lights. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I think everybody knows the difference between the warm toned lights of candles and dimmed incandescent lights that we often use in our homes and restaurants and things like that. And they also know the harsh bluish lights, especially of LED and HID car lights and things like that. That's what we want to get rid of, because the whiter, brighter, bluer it is, the more light pollution it creates. Slide, please. So lighting for all residences. This is ordinance requirements. They've got to be fully shielded, directward, downward, a maximum Kelvin temperature of 3000 K, which means they're all warm colored. Seasonal lighting can be over 3000 K. In other words, Christmas, holiday lighting, but is only allowed during the holiday period from November to January. Light trespass levels. These are important. Light trespass levels means light going from one property onto another. You've got to restrict it. You can't transmit light more than 1/4 of a foot candle onto adjacent properties, from your property onto an adjacent one. If you're translating or transmitting light onto environmentally sensitive habit areas, or ESHA, or even ESHA buffers, or the ocean, or beaches, or public viewing areas, it's even less, 0.1 foot candle. Now, 0.1 foot candle is a lot of light in a really dark area. So keep in mind, these are very, very strict requirements that I'm hoping are enforced pretty well. Slide, please. There is a curfew. Lights got to be turned off by 11 p.m. or when people are no longer present in exterior areas, whichever is later, except for lighting activated by motion sensors, which extinguishes 10 minutes after activation, and lighting at building entrances and driveway egress points. So in other words, turn your lights off automatically, preferably, so that you don't have to remember to go switch the lights off at 11. Lighting intensity. The light source itself can't exceed 850 lumens. Every light bulb you buy and a lot of LED luminaires, the LEDs are built in. There's no replaceable light bulb. I'll talk about that in a few minutes, but you have a limit of 850 lumens. You can't mount them more than 18 feet above ground level, and especially lighting around the perimeter of the site. Many people want to put security lighting all around the perimeter. It's not required except as required specifically for security lighting purposes, and where it is controlled by a motion sensor, which extinguishes a light no later than 10 minutes activation. Okay. Lighting for aesthetic purposes on any parcel of land is located along, within, provide views to or invisible from any scenic area, scenic road, public viewing area, ESHA or ESHA buffer is prohibited. I've seen a number of homes in Malibu where there's quite a bit of lighting that can be seen from scenic areas, scenic roads. It's got to be extinguished, or actually, it's actually prohibited to even have it. So that one's going to be a bit of a challenge to enforce, but I see it's very important so we can achieve all the goals of the ordinance. Slide, please. Definition of shielding. Lights can be fully shielded, partially shielded, or unshielded. Fully shielded means a light can only travel downwards or outwards at an angle of less than horizontal. Partially shielding means some light can be seen when viewed from the side, but it appears to be not emitted upwards. Unshielded means light goes in all directions. If you can see brightness and glare from a light, it is either partially shielded or unshielded. Slide, please. Here's a really good example of the same place with two different types of lighting. In the upper image, the light is pretty efficient. It lights the entire area outside of this garage, but you can see the source. And you can see there's light getting on the upper parts of the building above it, seems to be spreading all over the place. So it's partially shielded, but if you look at the one in the bottom image, lights located in the same place that are fully shielded, you see the light goes downward, not outward. You can't see the light source. And that's a really good way professionally. I mean, it's a very simple way we professionally say it's either shielded or not shielded. Can I see the source? Slide, please. This is about that warm colored spectrum I'm talking about. We measure the whiteness or the color of the light source from cool to warm, and we measure it in something called color temperature. Color temperature actually has to do with physics and something I'm not going to try and get into much, but if you were to take what's called a black body object, something infinitely heavy like iron or something, and heat it up, when it gets to 1800 K, it'll glow reddish sort of white light. And as you make it hotter and hotter, moving from the light to the left, when it finally gets to blue hot, it is much higher in temperature than if it's only red glowing. I think people understand that, and they've seen that somewhere. The blue part of the flame is the hottest. That's true. Well, this matches that perfectly. So you've got to use the warm spectrum, 3000 K or less. I have never seen an outdoor lighting installation where that doesn't work just fine. The cool color, a lot of people say, oh, it's so much brighter. No, it's not much brighter. It's causing more glare. The human eye responds to the cool spectrum as a glare response. And so you may think it's brighter because it's causing more glare, but you're not seeing any better. Use the warm tone light and you'll be fine. I actually prefer 2200 K for a lot of outdoor lighting, street lighting included. I like 2400K and 2700K, maybe on residences. I don't think I'm even using much 3000K anymore professionally, because it's a pretty white colored light. It's on the border there of being what's even allowed. So always pick those lower color temperatures. You're going to find a lot of products available at 3000K, at 2700K. A little harder to find at 2400 and 2200. And I'll show you a few examples in a few minutes. Slide, please. All lighting from now, though, should be LEDs. LEDs are 6 to 10 times more energy efficient than incandescent, 2 to 5 times more energy efficient than any of the other light sources we use. And they last 10 to 100 times longer. You shouldn't be changing LED bulbs or fixtures much at all for virtually a decade. Slide, please. Now, these are your basic, you're going to be relighting. And these are some of the basic principles. First of all, there is a dark sky luminaire for almost every existing condition and style. It will create adequate lighted location where your other light existed. For do-it-yourselfers, dark sky luminaires can be found on the web or at lighting showrooms and DIY stores and websites. Those using professional designers or contractors, make sure they are observing the Malibu Dark Sky Ordinance. As I said, the maximum color temperature is 3000K, and it's better to use 27, 2400, or 2200. I'll also mention amber. For lighting along or near the beach, you should be using amber if you're going to have anything at all. It's been determined that amber light has the least impact upon sea turtles, other amphibians, and seabirds. So if you have to have light there, try to use amber. Each luminaire is limited to 850 lumens. Most LED fixtures don't have a socket for a screw-in lamp, so the luminaire itself has a lumen rating. Keep that in mind. Slide, please. Security lighting at the site perimeter is limited to motion sensing lights, 3000K or less, 850 lumens or less, and fully shielded. No other perimeter lighting is allowed. All lights must be turned off at 11 p.m. unless people are present, and must cease 10 minutes after the area is vacated. So if you're going to be doing outdoor lighting and you're going to have people over in entertainment areas, I'll show you in a few minutes, you can add motion sensing technology to just about any existing lighting system. Motion controlled lights are allowed at building entrances and driveway egress points. So if you pull into your driveway, you can have a motion sensor that turns on the lights in the front of the home so you can see your way into the entrance. The maximum mounting height of a residential is 18 feet. I've said that before. Light trespass onto these critical adjacent properties, 0.10 foot candles. That's a really small amount of light, so be very careful how much light you have in those areas. Slide, please. New LED luminaires have built-in LEDs that are not removable. Now, like I said before, this is normal. They're going to last for decades in most residential lightings. Most older luminaires have sockets for light bulbs. If you have an older luminaire or legacy luminaire and you want to install LED bulbs, as long as they're fully shielded, you can buy LED bulbs at 2700K, 2400K, or 2200K. Yes, you can get them at 3000K too. There are special sea turtle friendly lamps and luminaires, new luminaires, fully shielded. If you are going to have anything near the beach or environmentally sensitive habitat areas, please try to find sea turtle friendly luminaires. Slide, please. Just to give you an example, these are 10 watt ordinary A lamps. If you have a fully shielded luminaire, these are rated for indoor outdoor use. They're 800 lumens, they're 2700K, and a 4-pack of these from a major online retailer is under $15. It doesn't have to be expensive to do what we're talking about. It's just got to be careful. Slide, please. These are what are called LED filament lamps. One of the great things about filament lamps is their color temperature is 2200K to 2400K. So they're already really wonderful white, warm white lights. I use these in a lot of restaurants and hospitality, particularly because people like them. They like that warm, cozy light at night. This is a 7-watt lamp that puts out 800 lumens. This particular lamp, when you read the box, it'll say these lamps should be protected from water, but they don't have to be completely enclosed. If you have an existing luminaire and it's fully shielded, the light is coming out of the bottom of the luminaire, and chances are the top and sides are solid. So this lamp you'll be able to use in those luminaires. Slide, please. Many people have PAR replacement lamps, or excuse me, PAR lamps or R lamps. This is an R lamp. It's called a reflector lamp. There's a similar projector type called a PAR lamp. They are available at all color temperatures, but be really careful. So many of them are sold at 5000K. They're bluish, they're horrible, and they don't meet the ordinance. This is a 10-watt R lamp that puts out 700 lumens at 2700K. I know that I used to have cylinder type downlights mounted to my exterior walls. Actually, I still do in this house. And those cylinder type lights, they push the light downward, no light goes up or to the side, and they use these R lamps. Readily available from many manufacturers. Just be careful of the color temperature, and be careful, about 10 watts is roughly the limit for 700 lumens. You have an 850 lumen limit, so be careful. Slide, please. So for existing lighting, make sure your existing lighting is fully shielded. I have, like I said, cylinder lights. They're solid cylinders, top and side shielded. And I use those on purpose because I'm a dark sky guy with screw-in bulbs, just like we just looked at. But if you don't have fully shielded lights, you're going to have to replace them. You can replace the lamp in your existing luminaire, as I said, with an appropriate LED replacement lamp like I just showed you. But also, you're going to have to install lighting controls to turn off lights when not needed, or requiring automatic controls. Now, this is important. It is very easy and inexpensive to put in lighting controls that ensure your lights are turned off by 11. The way I do it is I have one of these controls, and it's set to turn the lights off at 11. Even if they're not on, it'll make sure that they're off. I'll show you one of those in a second. So there's these are some pretty straightforward things that you can do. Slide, please. These are examples of outdoor lights that will not pass. The one in the sort of brown one in the middle is a lantern, we'll call it, lantern style. No. Now, if you were to make the sides of the lantern opaque and have light just come out the bottom, that'd be a different story, but you'd have to change the sides of it to make sure that your light is going only downward. The one to its right, where you could see the light bulb, no. The one in the middle of that says AMAX on it. I don't know who that is. That's an LED floodlight. No. Those are probably some of the worst things you can do. But even ordinary lights, like the one to the lower left, where it's a bare bulb in a porcelain socket. Nope, can't do that. And the one to the right is a motion sensor equipped PAR light luminaire, spotlights. The problem is these spotlights are creating light pollution. They're not fully shielded. They're not really shielded very well at all. And you could certainly turn them straight up and create terrible light pollution. Motion sensor is a good idea, but you can't use those. So you're going to have to replace these with new LED luminaires that meet the requirements. And I'll show you some ideas here next. Slide, please. Oh, before I get to that, I want to talk a little bit about connected and smart lighting. On the left is a motion sensor alarm light. I purposely showed this, so I don't want to pick on anybody in particular, but this one company is a well-known company with a connected control system. And you put up this light, and it's a camera, and it's got the floodlights and a motion detector, and it's a pretty good security light. The problem is these lights are not shielded, and there is one brand that is starting to make inroads into making shielded motion sensor alarm lights, but right now I haven't seen one that you can buy. So be careful of pursuing this solution. Motion controls, on the other hand, here's one company, Ring. It's a very well-known brand. They have a motion sensor that can communicate with your Ring system, and you can, with the little device below, connect this up so that it controls your ordinance complying lighting. You don't need a blast light at somebody in the eyeball to provide security. All you have to do is turn on your outdoor lights most of the time. And so you can have a completely connected Alexa, smart, whatever you want it to be, motion controlled systems. That's what I would recommend. And by the way, these can be set, you can get versions so they have a manual switch, or you can use the motion controls. So compliant lighting can be smart as well. Slide, please. Here are some other controls you may want to consider. The one on the left, there's a number of different versions of these programmable wall switches. They can be programmed to have automatic on times, but they can also be programmed to have automatic off times. Some people like to turn on the light by their door. And if it's a fully shielded light and you want to turn on that light, you have to turn it off by 11. That's the ordinance. But you can use something like this. The one in the middle is a smart wall switch dimmer. This could be hooked up to the system we just looked at. And so it can be manually controlled, it can be a dimmer, and then it can be smart and respond to motion. Finally, there's what we call hardwired motion detectors, like the two on the right-hand side. The one at the top is designed to be connected into an existing junction box or wiring. The one on the bottom is more meant to have its own connections. Now you're getting into having specific controls for specific lights or specific areas. Once again, it's not that hard to do this, but it may require a professional electrician to do the wiring. So of these, the do-it-yourself is kind of limited to the two on the left. If you choose that, I wouldn't recommend the approach on the right unless you're a skilled electrician. Slide, please. These are strictly prohibited. String lights. String lights are going to be allowed for commercial properties where there's outdoor dining, but only when there's diners. But you can't do this anymore. I realize they're wonderful. Now you can use holiday lights during the holiday season. And some of those are very close relatives of these string lights, but sorry, they create a lot of light pollution, and we just can't keep going with that in that direction. Landscape uplights, because the lights are not fully shielded, in other words, they're shooting up, landscape uplights are prohibited. I know there's a lot of landscape lighting designers and landscapers who aren't going to like that very much, but for the sake of the night sky and all the creatures that live in it, when you light up the night sky, it doesn't just affect humans, it affects every living being, birds, bees, bugs, everything. It affects fish, wildlife of all kinds. So when you light up a tree, you're really lighting up a habitat that isn't naturally lighted this way. And so that's why shouldn't be doing that anymore. And again, as I mentioned earlier, floodlights on the right, these are just bad news for the environment. And find a better way. Find a better way to do what you need to do. Slide, please. These are all compliant light types. The one in the upper right-hand corner, when I said I have cylinder lights on my home, that's a cylinder light. There's variations. These are all variations on the idea. Some more decorative, some more traditional, some more contemporary. These are all complying lights. And one of the things that people say, well, excuse me, it doesn't light my, I don't think it'll light my front door or the area around my front door, my front stoop, my front steps. What happens is you're often mounted to a wall, and the light will hit the wall and it will bounce and it will light the area you're concerned about. As long as it starts out going downward, we've done what we can do in an ordinance to encourage dark sky friendly lighting. But if you're lighting a wall that's below it with it, that will help light the area. And so don't think it's, you're doing something bad by limiting yourself to downlight. You'd be surprised how well this really works. These are all, by the way, purchasable today from many manufacturers at many price points. So you don't have to worry about, how am I going to find these? I found all of these in about 15 minutes on the internet, just shopping around, and it was pretty easy. Slide, please. There's some other tricks that lighting designers use. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, there's a lantern. Looks like a regular lantern, but the light source is up in the top and it shines downward. And there's many times these are open on the bottom, so the light goes down and it comes out to the sides, but it's fully shielded. It counts as fully shielded. The one below it is even more specific and more obvious. Light can only go downwards, and it does, and it comes down and it spreads out afterwards. They both look like they're lanterns that would create a lot of light, but they're not. Step lights, if you're careful, and they have the lid on them, like this one, are also fully shielded. Not all step lights are. Some of them have bright white lenses that shine in all directions. No, those aren't, but there are some. Likewise, post-stop lights. Here's a contemporary post-stop, where once again, it's pretty obvious, all the light goes downward. And by the way, if you're disappointed for some reason that you're not getting enough light all over the place, remember, it's not doing much good once it starts shining in people's eyes 20, 30, 40 feet away. It's just causing glare. So these are all good solutions to everyday lighting problems. Slide, please. How do you find proper lighting? There's a number of websites. Shopping the internet is a good way to do it. And here's a couple of links to the Dark Sky, International Dark Sky Association has created these websites to help you try to find proper lighting if you're having trouble. Like I said, I didn't have a lot of trouble, but then I'm again a professional in the field. And if you're a homeowner, you're not experienced with this, try these out first. They might help. Slide, please. Yeah, now I went to all of these sites to see, because these are popular websites, easily found for people who are looking for light fixtures. So here's what happened. At Wayfair, I found 727. Not many are dark sky compliant, so you got to be careful. Even if they say they are, be critical and look at them critically, because often they aren't. Lamps Plus, see when and these are, I'm using the dark sky search on these as well. And Lamps Plus, almost all are compliant with the ordinance. Their website's much better at doing the search than Wayfair. Destinationlighting.com. And once again, a dark sky search, I got 1,053 results, and almost all of them are dark sky compliant. Home Depot, I did a dark sky search there. They had 181 results, but many were not dark sky compliant. Have to be careful there. Lumens.com, a dark sky search, 205 results. Many of them were not dark sky compliant. House.com, a dark sky search, 955. Many are not dark sky compliant. And that's because the people who develop these really don't know what they're doing relative to dark skies. You're going to have to be critical, but when you do these searches, but if you're careful and critical, you'll get there. There's a lot of choices available. Slide, please. So, do you do it yourself or do you do professional work? Doing it yourself means, first of all, I'm hoping, I'm praying you have some experience in basic residential wiring as a do-it-yourselfer homeowner. So you must be, first of all, if you're going to even try to do it, you must be limited to simple electrical work for which you really should be qualified in some way. Should be limited to replacing accessible luminaires and unitary switches and dimmers. In other words, something that doesn't connect to something else. And you should probably avoid wiring changes. On the other hand, professional work, I do recommend it, not because I'm a professional, because you probably, in many cases, you're going to hire a contractor or you're going to go to a showroom. You might use a professional lighting designers. I know in Malibu, there's a lot of homes with professional lighting design, but at least if you're doing it yourself, you're going to go to a showroom or the websites and vendors we talked about. But the installation would be by a licensed electrical contractor with a permit. All work should be done under permit. Plan review and approval is required. So it may be as quick as showing something at the counter if it's a basic installation. If you got a fairly complex plan, you're going to have to go through plan review, just like any other major improvement. I would strongly recommend this for large sites, especially if they have existing landscapes with a lot of landscape lighting, or sites with security lighting and driveway or entry issues. Use professionals. It will save you a lot of grief, because if you do something wrong and you're inspected and it doesn't comply, you're going to pay to tear it out and do it all over again. That's a waste of time and money. So consider these options and weigh them very carefully. Slide, please. So we have time for a few questions if we have a way to do that. We don't have a lot of attendees, so go ahead and let's see if we have any questions. If we don't have any questions, by the way, there's my email address. If you have a question and you'd like to see, you think about it later and you like to get an answer, send me an email. I'll give you an answer.
Thank you very much, Jim. As we mentioned before, this presentation will be on our website, has been recorded. We appreciate everybody that participated. We urge you to either submit your application if you're going to be some alterations to your electrical. The ordinance will be passing into effect. October 15 is the deadline. So thank you very much. And thank you, Tyler, from the planning department also. I think that's it. Thank you, Jim. Wonderful presentation as always.
You're welcome. Everybody have a great day.
You too.
Bye.